This
previous
conference will now be recorded.
I'll second that motion, Mayor.
Thank you, Peter. Clerk, call the roll.
Councilman Torrенcello,
In favor?
Councilwoman Diamond,
In favor?
Mayor Patricelli.
In favor. The first order, we'll ask for the reports of officers and committees. Joe, you want to start?
I know we have a lengthy agenda here tonight, plus a couple of PowerPoint presentation. The only thing I'm going to mention tonight is that Admiral Cleaners, if you haven't gone by 19th Street, it is down. The sign, we were able to keep at least a portion of the sign. It's in my office. We have that cleaned. It'll go over to the Historical Society, hopefully within the next few days. But we're moving forward with that location. Hopefully we'll see it cleaned up probably within another week to 10 days.
Okay, good. And anything else?
That'll do with it tonight, Mayor.
Mark, did you want to make mention of, I know you had a tree committee meeting. Is there anything that you need to report on that?
We do have a resolution on the agenda tonight for the tree committee for reappointment to Paul Farr to the tree committee. We're working with the engineers for the bike path project, Barton and LaJudas, to make sure that we can get some native trees included in there instead of just the placeholder trees. So we're working with Dan Rourke with Barton and LaJudas to do some change orders to get that accomplished. And we're working on a couple of the trees in the boulevards on 16th Street between 6th and 7th, and trying to repair a couple of the trees down in Persian Green Park. And we're still in conversations with the Arsenal about planting trees on Broadway in front of the Arsenal gate and on the Arsenal line. But the COVID issue has kind of slowed us up a little bit. But we're hoping once that's done, we can start the UFPO process and start that project as well.
Actually, I thought I saw them down there doing some markings. They might have been doing it for something else. And that's fine. Okay, thanks. Well, we'll go on to the next order of business. Is that the presentation by Chazen?
Yes, Your Honor. The first order of old business this evening is a presentation by the Chazen Company on the City Watervliet's Downtown Revitalization Initiative Study.
I'll make the introductions here tonight for everyone that's on. We have with us Norabel and Chris from Chazen Company. They've been working on the downtown revitalization plan for a little bit of time. We're going to be presented at least a draft of what, or a summary of what the draft copy looks like at this point. We've gone through, we've made some edits. I think we got a pretty good document moving forward. Chase has been very responsive to some of our comments and conversations, and those edits were made. So at this point in time, we'll turn it over to Norabel and to Chris to take us through the presentation.
Great. Chris Brown with the Chazen Companies. Norabel's off to the side. I don't know how you guys are seeing us. Thanks for having us. I had the planning group at the Chazen Companies. Norabel's been front and center in preparing the plan. Dave, I guess you're controlling the slides for us?
I believe Mark is.
Mark is, okay. Mark, you can go to the next. You can go to the next slide. We'll try to keep this brief for you. We provided Joe a draft of the plan. Joe provided us some comments, and we made those edits. And so you should have a draft in front of you. And the reason is just a background. The whole process started because the city has a vision to establish, a real downtown, create a sense of place, a sense of arrival on 19th Street and 2nd Avenue. And so this process was focused on how do we accomplish that, and then how do we apply for DRI funds, Downtown Revitalization Initiative funds, and that program should be announced any time now if the budget initiatives hold true. And so tonight's presentation will give you a little bit of background on that, a little bit about the DRI process, and then I'm going to hand it over and Norabel will talk about what's in the plan. If you go to the next slide. So the process started July of last year. The city established a steering committee. We had a series of meetings with those folks. We undertook a couple of studies, including, review of past planning efforts, demographic analysis, and most importantly, a market analysis that looked at retail, office, housing, and what were the opportunities there. And so we shared that information in the committee session. City staff were there. I know Dave Wheatley was front and center and very helpful and helping us capture what's going on in the city and how do we build on those positive efforts. And then I know too, the council members did participate in some stakeholder interviews we had in late in the fall, early winter of last year. And those were important because what we're trying to do is we're trying to attract investment in that area. And so we talked to a diverse group of individuals and we heard some really insightful information and that helped form the basis of the plan. We prepared some draft recommendations and Norval's going to run through those, which ultimately resulted in a draft plan that that we shared with you. Next slide. Just a little bit of background on DRI. It's a program that awards up to $10 million each year, one recipient in each of the 10 regions. You folks are in the capital region. Capital region included successful winners in prior sessions, including Glens Falls, Hudson, Albany, and Schenectady. It's a very highly competitive program, and the idea is the application sets forth the projects and the vision for the investments that you're going to be making. If you go to next slide. This is an outline of the process. And so the takeaway from this slide is that once you apply, if you're successful in securing funds, what will happen is the spring of next year, the state would announce that you would engage a consultant that would take on a very robust planning process, help identify projects and other initiatives. So what's in the plan and what's in the request today will be modified if successful. And so the projects could grow, they could be eliminated, new projects could come up, and at the end of the day of that planning process, which is a very compressed planning process, your consultant team would submit a strategic investment plan and outlining more projects that are going to get funded. So as an example, Glens Falls, put together some 30 or 40 projects, 5 or 6 of those get funded, and they're funded based on how significant an impact they're going to have on a community. If you go to the next slide. This is the study area, and I'm going to hand it over to Norval.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
So shifting now to Watervliet DRI, the focus of this study was really 19th Street, looking at that as kind of a commercial core, as Chris was mentioning. But we wanted to also include some of the residential side streets, as well as the municipal services that are down on 15th Street, and then extend to the waterfront to include Hudson Shores Park. And in that way, we're trying to include all the components or uses that really make up a successful downtown. Next slide, please. So Joe shared with you all, I believe, the draft plan. Really, in addition to this being a downtown revitalization plan, it really is a sales document. To that end, the contents, which are shown on the right here, it's a prescribed outline from the state of what needs to be included, the contents of it, and all of the items in it are really to answer the question of why Watervliet and why now? What are the investments? What are the job trends, the physical assets that the DRI could capitalize on? And the plan then concludes with a list of what are called transformative opportunities. And these are essentially recommendations of catalyst projects. As Chris mentioned, these are kind of preliminary recommendations. In this draft document that we prepared, we have about 20 recommendations that total over $20 million. They're both physical and programmatic. And if you were to receive funded, there would still be a planning process to kind of further hone in on what those exact recommendations would be. You could be adding some, removing some, modifying some that are included in this plan. It's really just to show that demonstrate that you've been doing some planning. Next slide, please. So there's a lot that's in this document. So in the interest of time, I just want to quickly go through some of the recommendations. I'm happy to answer questions and Chris as well at the end about the recommendations or anything else. But just to give an overview of the recommendations, we divided them into 5 categories, which I've listed here. One's related to 19th Street and downtown for improving it through placemaking. The second, showcasing Watervliet and expanding downtown business support capacity. The third, connecting Watervliet and expanding multimodal features. The fourth, reconnecting the waterfront and expanding rec and open space opportunities. And then lastly, encouraging homeownership and a great variety of housing options. Next slide, please. So in terms of 19th Street placemaking, and I apologize because there's going to be a lot of next slide, please, as I go through this, this list of items. The city's made a lot of improvements along 19th Street. We think that additional DRI funding could be used to continue this work. Next slide, please. A more big ticket item is the recommendation to establish a new construction project fund. With the planned BRT station, there's an opportunity to create more transit-oriented development right at that 2nd Avenue and 19th Street corridor, at that intersection there. And there's several underutilized sites. And as Chris mentioned, we talked to a lot of those holders and property owners as part of this process. While there's zoning updates that will come out of the city's updates to their comprehensive plan, which will be moving forward shortly, and that will help to encourage the kind of higher density development that the city wants to see at this location. Really, we think that there could be further funding that could be used to incentivize development that's consistent with the city's goals. Next slide, please.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
I didn't know what those last letters stand for. If you went to the previous slide.
So BRT is bus rapid transit and TOD is transit oriented development. So there's a planned BRT bus rapid transit station that's at that southwest corner of 2nd and 19th. And so we want to kind of look at that as an opportunity to encourage development that's mixed use at that intersection.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Next slide, please. Can you go to the next slide, please? Sorry. Thank you. So we also are recommending connecting Clinton Park to 19th Street so that there's a central green gathering space along the corridor. Next slide. And finally, for this 19th Street recommendations, we are recommending constructing off-street parking. And that could be in the form of parking lots or parking garages, but really most importantly, looking at the aesthetics of that and how would that interact with a more pedestrian-friendly environment, maybe with some facade treatments or with wraparound retail. Next slide, please. The plan also includes 5 recommendations related to showcasing the city and supporting businesses. The first is marketing and branding. We really want to set the city apart from the surrounding neighborhoods and communities. Several recommendations for financial support to existing businesses. These include Business Assistance Fund, continuing the city's micro enterprise loans, as well as facade improvement program to fund exterior improvements. And then lastly, with several businesses aging out, it's really important for the city to think ahead and begin recruiting businesses that we want to see on 19th Street to ensure that those spaces don't remain vacant. Next slide, please. Almost everyone that we spoke to during our stakeholder meetings remarked on how well connected Watervliet is to I-787, but we want to improve some of the other modes of connection. This includes completing pedestrian and bike connections to the waterfront. Next slide, please. Building off of the Mohawk Hudson bike hike trail extension along Broadway and connecting downtown and that trail to Hudson Shores Park. And then installing CDPHP cycle bike share stations. They're already in Troy and Manant, and we think that they should be in Watervliet as well. Next slide. We also recommend improving pedestrian connections from the kind of commercial core and the planned bus station at 2nd and 19th down to the municipal services on 15th. I think that there could be some improvements made along that corridor. And then lastly, next slide, better defining the entrances to the downtown at key locations with lighting, landscaping, and gateway signage. Next slide, please. The plan also includes several recommendations for Hudson Shores Park. These include improving and expanding public programming, reopening a destination barge, restaurant, or pier, or something of that sort, constructing a sound barrier with public art along I-787, all intended to increase utilization of that really nice open space. Next slide, please. And we're also looking at enhancements to the Watervliet pool. It's located at a pretty key location on 2nd Avenue between 19th Street and the Municipal Services on 15th. And consideration should be given for how types of spaces like this that are kind of more summer spaces can be used year-round, and that's especially important in upstate communities. And next slide, please. So lastly, consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and also the housing study that was done last year, the DRI plan includes 3 recommendations intended to encourage homeownership and a greater variety of housing options. These include developing a first-time homebuyers program, providing funding to improve the housing stock and convert rental to owner-occupied, and lastly, similar to the idea of the new construction fund at 2nd and 19th, funding to incentivize higher density mixed-use development on 19th Street. Next slide. And as far as next steps go, we look forward to getting the City Council's comments on this draft. And updating the draft that we have to incorporate those. And then we'd like to share the final plan with the steering committee and acknowledge them for the role they played in this process. And as a last step, we'll work with the city to gather letters of support, which will be included with the plan in the application that's submitted to the REDC. And now, if anyone has any questions, Chris and I are happy to answer them.
I do just a couple of real quick ones. Do we have, from past experience, do we have an idea how many communities in the capital region are going to be applying for this program? Is it virtually every community?
It's not. It has varied year by year. We've seen some years where it's been 3 to 5, and then others where it's been 8 and 10. Norabel, I'm not remembering. I think we looked at last year, and it was not a highly competitive year locally, but it varies. It has changed over time, and it's been opened up to villages, so it's broadened its eligibility. So that's an issue of concern. That answers the question.
Yes. Thank you. Well, just to follow up on that, if you are not successful this year, can you apply the following year?
Yeah. Yeah, in our earliest conversations with the city were, I think the folks involved at that time recognized, hey, it's probably, nobody wins their first time out, right? And it's usually 2 or 3 years. It is, surprise, surprise, politically influenced. And so it's important that you garner the support, right? That you garner the support of local, regional, representatives, the REDC, the Regional Economic Development Council, and that was one of the our next steps is letters of support. And so this is something that you can then use to have those conversations. So you have this plan in front of you, which is kind of unique that you have it in advance of even the application opening. So you have this now and start doing some of that networking.
And my only other question is that I know that you mentioned at one point recruiting businesses to come into the city and to establish businesses on 19th Street. Does Chazen help with the recruiting, or do you point us in the right direction on how to recruit businesses, or give us some insight or education on that topic, or is that completely left? Is that another separate entity or a separate group?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that would be an initiative, if funded, you would entertain, or you could do now as an example. And so usually business recruitment falls to a chamber, a local development corporation, a business association. And so part of it's matchmaking. Part of it's also making sure you have the right tools in place. And so we've talked about zoning, and there's some constraints on 19th Street that preclude, or at least don't entice or encourage businesses. And so that's, that could be classified as recruitment. And, then the bigger the initiative and the more sophisticated the tools and techniques. If you think of like the Albany Central Avenue Business Improvement District, right?
Right.
They're well-funded, they're well-organized, and they have all kinds of tools to assist with recruitment.
All right. Well, I'm aware that times have changed in the last few months, and money is tight, and I understand that. But prior to that, I think this was one of the most important things that Mayor Patricelli and that this administration was working on. I think this is a real step in the right direction for the future of the city. And I'm all. I think it's great. I want to go through the proposal more closely, and I know I want to talk to Mayor Patricelli and Councilwoman Diamond, and have maybe have some suggestions or some things like that. But I think it's a great step in the right direction. So thank you.
Chris and or Norabella, I realized that or heard that the Cohoes is also preparing their DRI study, and they're in the process. So what would set us apart from Cohoes? I mean, definitely we're going to have a tough time, looking for support. When you have, from let's say the powers to be, on the state level, and we're going to have to convince them which project would be the one that's going to, garnish that support. So what would be our, let's say, unique, let's say, opportunity here?
Yeah, it's a really important point. Cohoes is, as you all know, is a community on the rise, and they've made a lot of investments, and there's a lot of positive things happening there, and so they will be a strong competitor for this funding. I think one of the things that sets us apart in Watervliet is that, hey, it is the need and the vision, and that the significance that $10 million investment will make in Watervliet will truly be transformative. And so I think that's one of the things that we would drive home. And Norabella, if you got other thoughts, but those are important questions to ask. And I think we drafted a letter for you to insert in the application into the plan, Mayor. And I think it is leadership, it's vision, it's effort, right? And so all those things combined, I think, will help make that case.
I wonder if it would, if people who review all these applications would take into consideration that Cohoes had to do a lot of rehabilitation because of the fire that they had, that massive fire that they had. So I mean, some of their city has already been upgraded, updated, whatever. So maybe that's something that's we haven't done that, obviously. So maybe that's something that
Yeah.
Right.
But I think these would be good things just when you sit down with the REDC and other, state officials to help give feedback on those issues and how to distinguish ourselves.
One of the things I think we have to do too as a municipality is we have to get our planning board re-engaged back into the community in the sense of giving them this document, giving them the potential of how it can come to life. And by that means that they have to look at the comprehensive plan and our design standards, which we lack, and also our zoning, which is conflicting. We have to really get them to start thinking outside the box, get them to think what's it going to take to have this come to life? How are we going to be able to go vertical? How are we going to be able to go horizontal? What are the things are we looking for? What are we missing? So it's going to play a part with all of us, not only the council, but it's going to be our planning and it's going to be our zoning boards, and educate them on what it's going to take to make this a successful study come to life.
Great. Good idea, Joe. Have they received a copy of the draft yet?
Not at this time, Mayor. I wanted to present it to the council first and then present it to both boards and try to get a meeting and walk them through this presentation to show what the potential might be, and kind of explain to them some of the conflicting zoning regulations that I've come up against personally, and show how with a little bit of relief we could start realizing some good development within our community.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Anybody else have any other questions for Chris or Norabella? Thank you, everybody. We'll give it a lot more thought and let Joe know, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. We'll circulate back to you, Joe, and try to get a schedule to close this out so we can have the application ready.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Moving on, we have a presentation for the Fair Housing Program. Is that correct? Is that you, Dave?
I believe that's Paul Murphy.
Oh, Paul's on? Okay. Paul?
Presentation before the council regarding the fair housing program. I believe there's a PowerPoint presentation available. It's a short 5-page presentation. I don't know if you have it up there.
Anybody having trouble hearing this?
I
Yes, I'm
am,
having trouble hearing Mr. Murphy.
yes.
You have it up there? How about now?
It's very hard to hear, Paul.
Can you hear me?
It's very muffled, Paul.
Okay.
Mark, I believe you have also the wrong slideshow up.
Just try to adjust. Hello?
But you got the slideshow. Want to try again, Paul?
Not really. I can't really.
Yeah.
Dave, are you familiar with the program or the presentation? You want to take it for Paul?
I can try to walk us through it.
Paul's having trouble with his mic. Sorry, Paul.
So the Fair Housing Program provides, can you hear me?
Yep.
I can.
I
Okay.
can.
The Fair Housing Program provides equal access to housing pursuant to the law and promotes education, outreach, and assistance specifically related to the fair housing laws. The goal of this presentation is to affirmatively further fair housing programs in the city of Watervliet, provide the city council and the public with information on fair housing issues and policies, and in compliance with CDBG and New York State HCR requirements for fair housing activities in the city of Watervliet. The Fair Housing Program in Watervliet began in 1980 pursuant to resolution number 6249. The Fair Housing Officer is the general manager per that resolution. Fair housing complaints and questions are administered through the general manager's office, and complaints are filed in writing and addressed pursuant. You lost me, Mark.
Going good so far.
I think you got to go one more slide, Mark.
Good?
Yes.
Okay.
So complaints and questions are administered through the general manager, and they're filed in writing and addressed by the general manager pursuant to the Watervliet Fair Housing Plan. In 2019 and through to May 1st of this year, there were no fair housing complaints filed with the general manager involving the Watervliet at the state or federal levels. The requirements for the Fair Housing Plan encompass state and federal directives, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Section 3 of CDBG Act 1973, the Americans with Disability Act, the Fair Housing Act of 1968, Section 503 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and the Age Discrimination Act of 1975. Once a year, the City of Watervliet holds a public meeting to discuss any fair housing issues and to report the steps taken to address the fair housing policy. And this information becomes part of all of our CDBG program files and other housing projects that come up. The municipal compliance checklist for Watervliet adopted fair housing legislation. We did that through resolution number 6249, as mentioned. Conducted community housing needs survey. We've done that. Designate April as Fair Housing Month by proclamation. Distribute fair housing brochures. Post fair housing posters at City Hall and other buildings. Designate a fair housing officer by resolution, and have a plan and procedure for managing complaints. And we've met all of those compliance checks. And that is the end of the presentation.
Yeah, I think the purpose tonight was to make sure that everybody's aware that we do have a fair housing program here, and that anybody having any issues regarding fair housing, contact the general manager. The month of April, we did issue a proclamation for fair housing, by this office. So that has been signed and advertised for that. I think that was the main reason for the presentation tonight. I think. Is there anything else, Paul? Can you hear now? Is there anything else you need to add?
No, Mr. Mayor, they are pretty much everything's touched upon. There will be more information available at your request. There is a 40-page program plan that I didn't want to provide to you yet, and it'll be available to you at your discretion.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, does anybody else have any comments or questions on the fair housing program plan?
No, thank you.
Paul, thank you.
No.
Before we move on to the first resolution, other old business, Joe or Mark, do you want to mention anything about? We have the Dave Dressel was wanted to mention about what was it, the sewer
Lead service line?
no, it was the other thing,
The annual water, the MS4 report.
MS4 report.
Yeah.
I knew I was trying to mark it down. I couldn't come up with the name. MS4.
That's okay. He just wanted everyone to know that it is posted on our website. It's an annualized thing that the city does as being part of the stormwater consortium. It's out there. He's got 2 weeks for comments if there's any comments that are due back by anyone. And then at that point, it becomes sent down to Albany County, and Albany County files it behalf on the capital region municipalities that are inside that consortium. So he just wanted to let everyone know today that it has been posted. It has 2 weeks before it's sent to Albany County, should there be any questions in the interim.
And it is about stormwater, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you. I know we were trying to mention that the last meeting. We slipped by. All right. If nothing else, we'll move on to the next resolution.
The next order of business and old business is resolution number 9746, which was tabled at the last council meeting. This resolution states the Council of the City of Watervliet hereby authorizes participation in the New York School and Municipal Energy Consortium for cooperative energy purchasing services for electricity, and further authorizes and directs Mayor Charles V. Patricelli to execute all required documents and documents that are necessary and appropriate for this purpose.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we consider this resolution.
I'll second it.
Okay. Well, we had a couple of other discussions, and Mark, do you want to get into that?
Yeah, so through the last conversation with Sean Joyce from NICEMIC, we received an email from him 2 days ago stating that he didn't think that we would be allowed to choose rates until July of 2020. So based on that, that actually gives us some additional time to do some additional cost benefit analysis, and gives some more room to have National Grid start giving us some information so we can, ensure that we're moving forward in the right direction. Jordan has options for the council in order to move on this. So I'll defer to Jordan at this point, and he can let you go through the process.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Mark. Everybody can hear me, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's my understanding after, speaking with Mark that the council is really not in a position at this point to vote on this based upon the information that Mark, who's been working diligently on this, is required in order to adequately provide all the information for the council. So the first option that we have is to, continue to table this, or the other word is adjourn it, and that at some point in time, we would have to take a formal vote on it. The second option would be to withdraw the resolution. If we withdraw the resolution, then the resolutions afterward would just have to be renumbered. So if we withdraw this resolution number 9746, and then if we go into new business, the next resolution would be 9746. Or the third option would be, since we're not in a position to really move forward with this and vote in the affirmative, the council has the option to, vote no on this resolution, and then we can continue to move forward with the other resolutions. And then in the future, if it's appropriate at that time to consider another resolution to have the council authorize the participation in NICEMIC, then we just draft another resolution with another corresponding number at that time.
All right, well, I think since I made the motion to consider this resolution, I'll make a further motion, if it's okay with the council, to withdraw this resolution from consideration at this point.
That's door number 2.
That's door number. I'm opting for door number 2. And that
this
means that it's a sort of a nullity, and that when we want to reconsider this same matter, while it may have a new number, it's not going to change anything of substance. Is that correct, Mr. Yuba?
That's correct with respect to the voting of the energy purchasing services for electricity, but the rates at that time would be would be different. Would that be accurate, Mark?
Yeah, and just so I can clarify, and it's going to sound like I'm trying to backtrack here, this isn't any fault of the city that we wouldn't be able to enter into this agreement until July. What happened is that we're kind of an anomaly because this is a 3-year contract. They're actually in the 3rd year of a 3rd-year contract. And in order for the vendor to rebid it, they want to wait until July to refresh their rates to offer them to us. So I didn't want to give anybody the misperception that Mark dropped the ball on this. And again, sounds like I'm trying to cover myself. But it's more based on when the vendor can refresh his rates rather than how we are moving through this process.
So if we decided to go forward with this at some point, we would get in at the beginning of the new 3-year contract, is that it?
We would either get in July, and that would be the last month, that last year of the existing
okay.
contract, or we can wait until the following April, and we would get it in April of 2021, and then we would be in the 3-year bid process.
Okay. Well,
So,
that's
there's
fine.
would you withdraw your second on that, Barb?
Yes, I'll withdraw my second on the resolution.
Okay, concur. So what we'll do is we'll actually withdraw the resolution, and all the further resolutions will be renumbered. Okay?
Correct.
Before we get on to that too, Mark, I know this is concentrating more on only concentrating on the electric. And I know we talked more about the gas at the same time, but are we going to explore any of the gas options out there?
We can, we just can't do it through this vendor.
Right, that's okay. I don't have a
I
problem.
shouldn't say we can't do it through this vendor, but the vendor is offering rates that are higher than the rates that we have right now. So if we choose to pursue it, we would do it through another vendor.
Okay. And this isn't the only vendor for electric either. We just needed, this was an issue we had with the procurement that we felt we needed to get through the other bids. But there are other vendors who are also bid for electric bulk purchase also.
That's correct.
So when if we want to wait till July for this, or close to June for this, are we going to pursue the investigation for maybe either one other vendors, and also it's the same thing as about gas?
Well, yeah, we can do the same thing. We can actually look through NYSEMIC in the event that their gas rates go down and we get a better rate through them. Then we can use NYSEMIC for electric and gas, or we can pursue another probably 3 vendors in order to meet the procurement policy. But we would go out and look for 3 different vendors to get the best rates that way.
Okay. And isn't the New York State Power Authority also one of the vendors?
Power Authority is, but I don't believe they are for gas. I believe it's only for electric.
For electric, right. But they would be one of the 3 quotes. They could be.
They could be, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Well, then that resolution withdrawn will go into, if there's no other old business, we'll go into new business.
Jordan, in order to withdraw that, just for clarification, we do not need to vote on that?
Correct. I believe there's no formal vote that's required. It's just withdrawn.
Okay. All right. So in new business, Your Honor, the first resolution then is number 9746. The Council of the City of Watervliet hereby determines that the Watervliet Microenterprise Grant, program number 1210 ME 140-19, is a type 2 action, and that no further action or review relative to this project is required by seeker.
Mayor, I'll make a motion that we move on the resolution.
I'll second that.
Okay. Joe?
Sure, I can speak briefly to this. So this seeker action is due because we're taking our micro enterprise grant funding that we received last year. It's a $200,000 grant, and we've been looking at repurposing it. Dave Wheatley, Paul Murphy, and I have been talking to the Office of Community Renewal on several occasions. The micro enterprise grant fund was primarily for startup and job creation. But we had an idea to actually repurpose the funding and repurpose it in the job retention for within our city. We know the effects of what the COVID shutdown has done to a lot of small business within our township. We had this funding available to create jobs, which we think would be very minimal at best, and the greater impact would have been on the retention for small businesses within our community. So as I said, we had several conversations with the Office of Community Renewal, and they agreed to our design or a redesign of the program, and allowed us to come up with a funding stream that we can get grant funding out to the small businesses within our community up to $5,000 per application, which will allow the small business owners from 25 on down, 25 employees on down, to give them that little bit of gap or that little bit of edge to get a little funding back into their resources to continue or help them open and stabilize. So this is really a seeker action to allow us to pursue this, and we can go forward to finalize the application and to start working with OCR to get those fundings back to us. And the type 2 action is we're not building anything, they're already here. So it's a minor action according to seeker, and we're asking you to adopt the resolution 9747.
Or 6.
Or 6.
6, sorry about that.
Do we know how many businesses are in the city that are in that category, 25 and under? I'm just curious.
That's a great question, Barb. We're trying to aggregate that now. We have a number of databases. We have a number of information out there as to it, but we're going to make sure that no one's left out of the process before we send this out. So we're going to make sure we have the right information, the right contact people, so that they can all apply. But we'll hopefully have that within the next few days before this application is out.
Thank you.
David, unless you have any other thing on it as far as a number of businesses.
I think the last check we had somewhere between 105 and 120. Like Joe said, there was a few different databases that we were drawing from, but it's somewhere in that range.
Okay. That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions on it, then I'll ask for the clerk to call the roll.
Councilman Torricello,
In favor.
Councilwoman Diamond,
In favor?
Mayor Patricelli.
In favor. Just before we go on to the next resolution, were we going to consider now at this point having an executive session? Joe, we're going into executive session now and then coming back out of there. Was that our plan, or are we going to wait?
I was going to take your lead, Mayor. We could do it now, or we can go into we can do it at the end. Preferably, it would probably be easier to go now if Mark is set up with his.
What do you set up to do now, Mark?
I'm good to go. So if we want to go to executive session, you would, obviously go through the Robert's rules to get there. And then I will remain signed into this go-to-meeting. I will send the council an invite for executive session. The council, the mayor, the GM, and anybody else invited would sign off of this session, go into the new session. I can still monitor what's going on here, and that way I can ensure that everybody can get back in.
Okay. Well, do I need a motion then to go into an executive session?
I'll make a motion that we go into an executive session.
Mayor, if I can just intercede for a second. So it's my understanding that with respect to the topic, the motion to move into executive session would be for the purpose to discuss employment of personnel and potential collective negotiations, which are authorized pursuant to Section 105 of the Open Meetings Law. And Mayor, if you could just identify, please, the individuals that you would want to attend the executive session.
General Manager Watervliet, Councilwoman Diamond, Councilman Torricello, yourself, Jordan, and Amanda Austin. Do we have anybody else that is needed?
You want me?
In Dave.
Are you able to come in, Mark, at the same time?
Yep.
Oh, okay. And then Mark Spain as well. I thought you had to stay out. Okay. And what you
Okay,
say? And Dave Wheatley.
Dave.
I'll second Councilwoman Diamond's motion.
I apologize for everybody who's on the call, but we'll be as quick as we possibly can, and we'll be back. Will the clerk call the roll?
Councilman Torricello,
In favor?
Councilwoman Diamond,
In favor?
Mayor Patricelli.
In favor.
Okay. So
We're gonna log out and then log in with a new
I'm
one.
going to leave this meeting, right?
And
Okay,
Dave, and Mark's going to send us a new link for another meeting.
leave the meeting. Okay. All right. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, okay.
All right, I'm in.
All right, Mayor, just so you know, you're going to have to do some significant editing because I couldn't turn off the record button.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
sound-
All right, good.
Okay, I appreciate everybody waiting, and I appreciate we start the meeting again. We just came out of a session, so I don't think we need to seeing that we never did this before. We just go into to continue on with the new business. Gordon, right? So
Yes,
Last-
that is correct, Mayor.
Yes.
all we need to do now is for our resolution 9747.
974. Yep. Is everybody that we need is here, right?
Joe, you on?
I'm here.
Is Joe on yet?
Yep.
He's here.
All right, we're ready then.
So resolution number 9747, the council of the city of Watervliet hereby authorizes David Wheatley, city clerk and clerk to the council, to advertise once in the official newspaper that the council of the city of Watervliet will hold a public hearing at the city council meeting on May 21st, 2020 at 7 p.m. for the purposes of reporting grants funded using CDBG program income revenue. The hearing will provide information to the city council and the public on the progress and effectiveness of the Watervliet Housing Rehabilitation Grant, the Watervliet Planning DRI Planning Grant, and the Watervliet Comprehensive Planning Grant. The public hearing will provide an opportunity for review and discussion of those grants and allows persons who wish to be heard an opportunity to comment.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion that we consider this resolution.
I'll second it.
Okay. Okay, anybody want to talk about that a little bit?
So Mayor, this is basically, it's a housekeeping. It's required by the Community Development Block Grant Program that we report on the programs, give update to the community and allow the community to comment and ask questions on the grants as they're proceeding.
Mayor, if I may, Mayor, this is also the first time that we're going to be having, it's my understanding, a public hearing during New York being on pause, and since the governor has, declared a state of emergency, and there is an executive order that's identified in the resolution that allows public hearings to be held remotely. So the second resolved in the resolution, and thanks to Mark Spain for providing the information, allows the public to obviously participate in the public hearing. That's the purpose of it, and the information is contained on the resolution, and it's my understanding that this will be advertised in the official newspaper, will also be placed on the city's website, and any persons who choose to provide any written information or comments can provide those to our city clerk, Mr. Wheatley, by email, or if they have any questions, they could call him at his phone number for any assistance or any further information. So that's another thing that I wanted to mention with respect to this public hearing.
Okay, good. Very good. Okay. The only other thing about that too is on May 15th is supposedly the date. If anything changes, what will happen? I mean, what if we're able to get together? Do both?
May 15th?
Right, May 15th. May 15th is the governor's, let's say, expiration of the,
Oh,
Right.
Well, that's a very good question, Mayor. I mean, certainly we would advertise, we would obviously let the public know that we're meeting, in person if we're able to do so. I guess we could certainly do both. Yeah, it's a very good question, but I think that, this official notice is going to be going out as a legal notice. And we could always convene, a special meeting beforehand and re-advertise. That's one other way, but either way, I think we would be able to have a public hearing and be able to notify the public that we can either do it in person or by way of public meeting. But there should be another notice, I think, that may go out if we're able to convene in person and have people attend in person to provide their comments.
Okay, I just bringing it up as, I doubt if it's a likelihood anyway, but it's just, who knows?
Mayor, we could always do a go-to meeting. If we
Right.
have a regular council meeting where everybody convenes, we could still do the go-to meeting there for this portion of it. And that way we stay within the guidelines of the resolution.
Okay, I agree. Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilman Torncello,
In favor?
Councilwoman Diamond,
in favor?
Mayor Patricelli.
In favor.
The next is resolution number 9748. The council of the city of Watervliet hereby approves, ratifies, and confirms the reappointment of Paul Farr to serve as a member of the City of Watervliet Tree Committee till March 19th, 2023.
Mayor, I make a motion that we move on the resolution.
I'll second that.
Okay, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, just a reappointment of Paul Farr to the Tree Committee. Is there any other questions or discussion on it? All right, I thank Paul for renewing his commitment to the Tree Committee. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilman Torncello,
In favor?
Councilwoman Diamond,
In favor?
Mayor Patricelli.
In favor.
Next order of business is resolution number 9749. The council of the city of Watervliet hereby approves amendment 3 to task order number 40, task order number 80, and task order number 90 between the city of Watervliet and Gomez and Sullivan Engineers, DPC, with an address of 288 Genesee Street, Utica, New York, 13502, for engineering services regarding the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission relicensing of the Normanskill Hydroelectric Project, and further authorizes and direct Mayor Charles V. Patricelli to execute same.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion that we move on this resolution.
I'll second it.
Okay. Mark?
Yeah, so this is just the official resolution allowing the mayor to enter into the agreement with Gomez and Sullivan, who are consultants on the FERC relicensing process. As you remember, last week we did a presentation to try to bring everybody up to speed as to where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. So these are the task orders that Gomez and Sullivan has put together in order for us to move forward with the relicensing agreement.
Okay. If there are any other questions on these, on this, this resolution?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, good. Then I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilman Torncello,
In favor?
Councilwoman Diamond,
In favor?
Mayor Patricelli.
In favor.
Your Honor, the next order of business is resolution number 9750, a seeker resolution determining the issuance of serial general obligation bonds to finance the infrastructure improvements, including replacement of lead lines from the municipal water main at an estimated cost of $600,000, will not result in significant adverse environmental impacts. The council of the city of Watervliet hereby determines that the proposed project is a type 2 action, and the council is precluded from further environmental review.
Mayor, I make a motion that we move on the resolution.
I'll second that.
This is just a standard resolution when we are issuing bonds for projects. Our bond counsel has classified this as a type 2 action, and therefore under the New York State Environmental Conservation Law, we do not need to do any further environmental review.
Excellent.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilman Tornsello,
In favor?
Councilwoman Diamond,
In favor?
Mayor Patricelli.
In favor.
Resolution number 9751 is a bond resolution authorizing not to exceed $600,000 aggregate principal amount of serial general obligation bonds to finance the construction and reconstruction of the City Watervliet water distribution system.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion that we move on this resolution.
And I'll second it.
Okay,
This is a bond resolution for the LSLRP, the 9th Avenue project, the 9th Ave lead pipe replacement project. We are doing a bond for the full amount, but we do not anticipate taking the full amount. We have some grant funding coming in for a portion of it, so but it's always recommended to take a bond resolution for the full amount, plus a little for contingency.
and this is a 9th Avenue project. Actually, we had a pre-construction meeting today on this project, and it's scheduled to start. Is the start date on it, Mark?
Yeah, so we're going to be doing a field meeting on Monday with the contractor. The contractor wants to start not too soon after that, so we're probably going to be shovel ready probably mid to late next week.
Okay. So another street tore up.
So are the residents going to be asked at that point if they'll let someone into their home to determine what kind of pipes they have?
Yeah, actually, we've actually had some conversations with some of the residents already. After we have the field meeting on Monday, we're going to place leaflets in all the doors to let people know that we're going to be in the area and what the project is in totality. Advise them of parking issues that they may run into during the project, and water supply, things like that. So once we have this field meeting on Monday, we'll probably hit the ground running, but we're going to make sure that we can give everybody as much advance notice as possible. And, obviously we're prepared for people to say, at this time, we don't want you to come in, and we're going to do our best to try to work around those issues.
Yeah. All right. I was just curious. Thank you.
Okay, no other questions. I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilman Tornsello,
In favor?
Councilwoman Diamond,
In favor?
Mayor Patricelli.
In favor.
Resolution number 9752, the Council of the City of Watervliet hereby authorizes the mayor, general manager, and director of finance to take the steps necessary to cut city expenses, including through the furloughing and/or laying off of city employees, and further authorizes the mayor to enter into agreements regarding employee furloughs.
Mayor, I'll make the resolution that we, I'll make the motion that we consider the resolution.
I'll second that.
Okay, Joe, you want to?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So the conversation was had in executive session regarding some of the steps needed to take into consideration reviewing our budget, reviewing our revenues, expenses, including positions that may come into play. This is all based on the COVID-19 crisis that I think every municipality is dealing with across the state. We're looking at numbers, we're trying to gather as much as information as we can to see what the impact is going to be. But we need to do a lot of analysis to get to that point. And the resolution allows the mayor the Director of Finance and myself, or our office, I should say, looking through the various components to see what type of savings we need to make sure we stay fiscally sound.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank
Okay. If there's no other questions regarding that we haven't already discussed, I'll ask the clerk to call the roll.
Councilman Torricella,
In favor?
Councilwoman Diamond,
In favor?
Mayor Patricelli.
In favor.
Your Honor, that concludes the new business for this evening's meeting.
Okay. Does any other council member have anything else they want to talk or add before we get into appropriations and accounting?
Nope, thank you.
Okay. Then I'll ask the Director of Finance, Amanda Lawson, to give us a little presentation on the 2019 year end.
Thank you, Mayor. So the Finance Department is currently comprised of 3 people. Myself as Director of Finance, our Payroll Clerk, Amanda Delap, and our Purchasing Clerk, Phyllis Carroll. You can change slide, please. The Finance Department is responsible for the maintenance and submission of the city's financials, and those financials are made up of several funds. You'll hear a good bit about 3 of those funds, our general water and sewer funds. Those are operating funds and the ones tonight's presentation is going to focus on. I'm going to try and be brief because I do know what time it is, but there's a bit to go through. So just explaining those funds, general fund I'm going to explain last. Special revenue, we have 3 of those, our water, our sewer, and community development. These accounts, this accounts for the proceeds of specific revenue sources that are legally restricted to expenditures from or for a specific purpose, meaning revenues received from the water fund must be used and can only be used for water fund expenses. Our capital project funds are accounts, and they account for financial resources to be used for the acquisition or construction of major capital facilities. An example of this would be the 9th Ave project. And then debt service funds. This fund is for the accumulation of resources for and the payment of general long-term debt, principal, and interest. And as I said, I'd come back to the general fund. The general fund is everything else. Its actual definition is to account for all financial resources except those required to be accounted for in another fund. And this is where, our everyday expenses come from, expenses and revenues are recorded. And that's why I'm going to talk about them first. Slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to hit on the major changes. This is comparing 2018 actual results to our unaudited 2019 results. We do have an audit coming. It's not complete yet. So first line is the real property tax. It's up roughly $270,000 or 5.5%. And it makes sense that that is up because that was our tax increase for 2019. Sales and use tax. This is sales tax. Sales tax was up $127,000 from 2018, but it's actually $250,000 higher than our budget, which is significant. We weren't expecting it to be that high. We had some good Q4 numbers both years. The next big ticket item is other non-property taxes. This is franchise and utility taxes. So we get a portion of revenue that National Grid, companies like National Grid or Charter Communications get. You'll see that it's down year over year. And I don't exactly know why. I have my guesses. Energy costs were down and people are dumping cable in lieu of streaming services. but it's something that is calculated by those companies and then sent to us. It's based on their revenues, so their revenues are down. The next big ticket item, departmental income. This had some ups and some downs. Just some big ups and downs were increases in ambulance revenue of almost $65,000. We had an increase in refuse revenue of $41,000. In 2019, we picked up a contract to pick up Maplewood's garbage. So that was that's what that came from. And you'll notice it's not quite that high. We had some decreases due to administrative grants. We didn't receive the portion of revenue that we did in 2018. So that's down about $80,000 from 2018. Other local revenues, these are miscellaneous revenues. You'll see a big decrease of $82,000. This is due a lot to, actually it's mostly all due to National Grid. They did not pay their dig permits on time. So, you know, National Grid goes around and they dig all these holes. Well, we charge them for that. And it's to the tune of about $100,000. And I only have a certain window in which I can claim revenue if it's received after year end. So I have 60 days after 12/31. So if it's received in January, February, I can record it. We received their revenue about 65 days after year end. So unfortunately, it's not going to count towards 2019, but it will count towards 2020. Our state aim is the same year over year. It's been that way for several years. Although 2020, we're not necessarily expecting that. And then you'll also see the state and federal aid. It's down about $100,000. We should have received an additional $100,000 in grant funds from CHIPS, which is our Consolidated Highway Improvement Program. Every year we do repairs to the roads and we're allowed to use CHIPS money to pay for those up to a certain dollar figure that they provide us. And last year we were supposed to receive $100,000 of multimodal funding. That just did not come in time. But we should receive it in 2020. Next slide, please. Moving on to general fund expenditures. The first line item had some ups and downs, nothing really major. We had some changes to the custodian, the clerk, liability insurance, and we spent more money in court settlements in 2019 than we did in 2018. The next line is public safety. Now you don't see a significant change. It's only $843, but it did have some big movement. So I just wanted to outline a few items. Salaries and overtime were both up for the police department. Overtime was up for the fire department, but salaries in the fire department were down. The police department general operating expenses were up about $15,000 from 2018, and fire department operating expenses were down about $16,000 from 2018. Another spot where you're seeing a little savings in the police department, even though their salaries and overtime were up, they had less officers out on injured on duty, so that saved about $40,000 from 2018. Moving on to the transportation, $135,000 of that decrease is from CHIPS. last year, in 2018, there was $304,000 of expenses. In 2019, we're only recording 169 of those expenses. And again, that gets reimbursed by the CHIPS program. So you see the revenue is decreased as well as the expense. Moving on to home and community services. The expenses were up about 136,000. A good chunk of that came from landfill charges, which were up about 45,000 over 2018. And we also had an LED project in 2019, the cost of about $82,000 higher than it was in 2018. In addition to that, there was refuse vehicle maintenance up about 12 grand. These trucks are getting older and they break down and need to be repaired. We don't have any extra garbage trucks, so when they are down, they do need to be repaired. So sometimes we pay for that. The last really big item here is the employee benefit fringes. You'll see that is up $158,000. This is pretty much increases to our health insurance costs for premiums and co-pays. You'll see that increase among all three operating funds. Next slide, please. So I've showed you the revenues and the expenses for the general fund. What does it all mean? It means that we ended up with an unaudited increase in general fund balance of $342,000. $250,000 of that can be attributed directly to the sales tax. It was $250,000 higher than budget. And the other items were just discussed. Some were also discussed last week. So this brings us to a total fund balance in the general fund at the end of 2019 of $1,038,000. And I'm expecting our fiscal stress score to be below 45, which will give us no designation for the first time in a few years. Next slide, please. This is just a summary of our reserve balances as of 12/31. We have pretty healthy equipment reserve and reserve for repairs. You'll notice our accrual reserve is down quite a bit from 2018. We had 8 retirees and 2 other departures with significant time. So we're down to about $13,000. And then the other couple of funds there, the workers' comp reserve is for an old workers' comp reserve. We started a new one in 2020 because we're going self-insured. So that's something that's a bit older. And then our debt service has $47,000 in it. Next slide, please. Moving on to the water fund. Again, just hitting some big items. The home and community services is actually just the water rents. This is, you don't see like a very large, well, it's $14,000 different than 2018. Arsenal usage was actually down, but we did an utility account audit last year. So we made sure that we're billing parcels based on the correct number of units, and that boosted our revenue a bit on that side. The other is our hydro. Our hydro revenue was down in 2019 from 2018. Moving on to the expenditures. The special items is down about $10,000. we cut work that we were going to do. We had budgeted to do for the hydro, but we had an unexpected tax increase, so we did not perform that work last year. The next line is where you're going to see that tax increase. Guilderland increased their tax assessment on our reservoir, and that resulted in a $246,000 increase in school taxes alone in 2019. Our property tax was not affected in 2019 because their assessments were effective May 1st, I believe. So the $246,000 was an increase in just school tax. As I had said, with the general fund, employee benefit fringes, health insurance was up. So there's an increase you're seeing there. The interfund transfers, this is something that is per the budget. We just didn't do as much in 2019 as we did in 2018, but we did do what was budgeted. So at the end of the day, this resulted in an increase in fund balance of $159,000, bringing our total fund balance to $707,000. Next slide, please. Moving on to our sewer fund. The sewer rents were down $42,000, but it's a little misleading. 2018 actually had a payment from the Arsenal from 2017 in it. As I had said with the general fund revenues, it wasn't received in that 60-day period for 2017 to count it, so it counted towards 2018's revenue. So 2019 didn't have that extra revenue stream, which was fine. Like that didn't hurt the budget at all. We hit our budget number. The other in the expenditures is due to increases in our liability insurance and an increase in audit costs due to us having to do a single audit. We had reached a certain income threshold. If you reach $750,000 of grant revenue in one single year, whether it's state or federal funding, you have to do a single audit, and that costs more than a regular audit. Last year we had to do a single audit, so we incurred some extra costs there. The sewer rents, the expenditures is up about $40,000. $10,000 of that can be directly attributed to our MS4 coordinator. We don't have one on staff here at the city. We use the Stormwater Coalition's MS4 coordinator, and because of that, there was a $10,000 added expense year from 18 to 19. Other increases were from spending money to repair our sewer system. We had a camera study done in, I believe, 2018, 2019, to go through our sewer system, and now we know what those problems are, and because we know that, we have to make repairs to it, and we started doing that in 2019. Fringes, again, as I said, you're going to see increases due to health insurance, but also in the sewer fund, we started budgeting and expensing retirement fringe benefits out of the sewer fund. We have not done that in the past, and the sewer fund does not technically have any specific employee dedicated to the sewer fund, but there are employees like, for example, Dave Dressel. He is our water fund supervisor. He's paid out of the water fund, but he deals with the sewer issues as well. So part of his salary is allocated to the sewer fund. And so should a portion of his retirement. So we started doing that in 2019. We started allocating retirement expenses there. And interfund transfers, This is transfers to our reserves. Again, this was per the budget for 2019. We started transferring money from the sewer fund to the reserves, particularly the repair reserve, because the sewer fund does benefit from using those funds from time to time, so they should also be contributing to it. All of this resulted in a surplus of $25,000 and bringing our total fund balance in the sewer fund to just over $75,000. Bringing it all together, this is for the past 5 years. We had an increase of fund balance for all three funds of just over $527,000. And that's all I have to say. Does anyone have any questions?
Good
Oh,
job.
very good.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything? Nice job, Amanda. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Amanda. That was great.
Thanks.
Great job, Amanda. I do have one thing. And when we opened up the meeting tonight, I talked about the annual report and I labeled it as the stormwater report. I just want to correct myself. It's the annual drinking water quality report that is posted on our main page of the city website. And that'll be posted there, like I say, for those couple of weeks. It is still an aggregated report from the county. So I just wanted to clarify and get that on the record.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. If there's anything else under appropriation accounting, Amanda?
Not at this time.
Okay, then I'll open up the public comment period. Dave, you want to give the?
Sure. At this time, the mayor and the council have authorized a public comment period. If you wish to comment, we ask that you unmute your microphone so Mark can hear you or know that you have a question. You have 2 minutes with which to address the council on any item that you wish. And we ask that you first state your name and address before beginning speaking.
Right. Anybody want to go first? Anybody have any comments? Anybody at all? Okay.
I was waiting to be acknowledged.
Lucky I saw that one because you have to scroll over to see it. Okay, go ahead.
So I had a question as far as the dog park, if there's been any farther
Name and address.
movement on that.
Name and address they're asking.
Oh, sorry. Paul Hughes, 108 15th Street.
Thank you.
Well, I wanted to see if there was any further movement on the dog park. And I also wanted to ask a question as far as the water pipes on route or on 9th Ave. Is the city gonna do from where the road is into the house? And how do they address that with people that have porches? That's it.
All right. Do we have a comment on the dog park, Joe or Mark?
Well, at least I can comment as to the fencing. We were heading down the path that we were going to be getting that fencing donated, possibly by a foundation. So we're actually now looking to get extra bids from other entities. We had one bid come in, which was fine because it was a private entity now paying it. And because of that, we've gone out to two separate or two other fencing companies. And unfortunately, during the COVID crisis now, estimating has gone a little bit behind. So we're waiting for them to come back up and come out here and give us an estimate so we can go forward and appropriate the funds from other grants that we may have.
So that's all right on the fencing. As far as the 9th Avenue and the water lines, go ahead, Mark. You got? Or
Yeah,
Dave?
so, really the only issue that we're going to have is if it's actually a lead line. So the regular lines, copper lines, aren't being replaced. So if, the line that happens to be a lead line that needs to be replaced, restoration is part of the grant. So if we do have to disrupt some of the structural areas under a porch in order to get into the household, that the restoration is part of the grant to restore the house to its original cosmetic look.
Paul, I'm assuming, Paul, you're talking about Ellen's house for does she have a lead line? Do you know if?
Correct. She said that they came in and looked at it. They were going to replace it. But my question was, I didn't know if they were going to just take and connect it to the other line and then pull it into the house, or if they had to dig it all the way up 5 foot deep, all the way to the house and take the porch off. I thought they would just connect it and then just slide it into the house and then cut it off.
Yeah, if we can mull it, obviously that's one of the options that we have. But, the plan right now is a new curb box and then curb box into the house. So if we have the opportunity to just dead end the line and pull it and then run the new one in a different area, we'll probably take advantage of that.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else have any other comments? Okay. Don't see any or hear any. So I'll ask that the public comment period be closed. And just to let you know that the next meeting will be May 21st, assuming that this is probably going to be the mode that we'll be using for that meeting. And I want to thank everybody for putting up with the disruption tonight, or the interruption with the executive session, and coming back. I appreciate it, and I appreciate all the help everybody else has given. Thank you very much. So if